Welcome to Tardisian Files. Hello listeners! In today's episode we will be reviewing the plot of Lucky Day. Lucky Day. And I thought Dot and Bubble made my blood boil, but gear up folks, because I have a lot to say about this episode. To recap, this Dr. Light episode is set in early 2025, where we see Ruby Sunday adjusting to life back on Earth. After appearing on his podcast, she befriends and later begins a relationship with Conrad Clarke, a young man who met the Doctor and Belinda from the future on New Year's Eve 2007, and years later witnessed the Doctor and Ruby tracking a predatory alien animal known as a shriek in 2024. He'd been looking for Ruby ever since that day, and in the process, he unwittingly was marked by the shriek as its prey for the following hunting season. Upon a trip to Coulson Village, a supposed shriek attack leads Ruby to call in Kate and other unit forces to neutralise the threat. It's revealed, however, to actually be a plot by Conrad and his associates from Think Tank, a far-right conspiracy theorist group who intend to push this narrative of aliens being a sham perpetuated by UNIT who are, they believe, acting as thought police controlling the masses. This stunt unfortunately works, with Conrad's arrest blowing up on social media and does serious damage to the reputation of UNIT and its employees, leading to all personnel needing to be removed to safe houses due to being ambushed by angry mobs after their addresses were leaked online. And this includes Ruby and her family. While at UNIT, the Shriek is being prepared to be removed from UNIT to Geneva by helicopter, while one of Conrad's lackeys, Agent Jordan Lang, gives Conrad access to the UNIT tower and a UNIT-issued gun. It turns out Conrad applied to work for UNIT in 2017, likely before it was shut down by Grand Serpent, but Kate rejected him after the interview, finding him to be untrustworthy. He shoots Lang and makes his way to the operations deck, where he begins insulting Kate, Ruby, Shirley and Colonel Ibrahim, all the while live streaming to try and get them to admit his false narrative is true. Now sufficiently provoked, Kate finally loses her temper and decides to give Conrad what he wants: the truth. She unleashes the Shriek and live streams the CCTV footage to prove that the Shriek is real, and the broadcasts Conrad admitting that he lied about UNIT from the beginning, all because of a grudge he held for being rejected at the interview stage. Ruby stuns the Shriek, and for a moment Conrad regains his composure and goes back to peddling his false narrative of special effects, only for the Shriek to wake up and bite his arm off. Later in prison, with his arm reattached, Conrad is taken into the TARDIS by a past version of the 15th Doctor who chides him for his ignorance, bigotry and entitlement, and points out that despite how much he loathes people like him, the Doctor still saves everyone regardless, and that Conrad wouldn't have the freedom to peddle his nonsense if it weren't for the Doctor and UNIT. Conrad smugly tells the Doctor about Belinda, and declares that he rejects reality and wishes to remain in his own little fantasy. Conrad is returned to his cell, where Mrs. Flood, introducing herself as the Governor, appears to set him free. Okay, so I'm gonna lay all my cards on the table and admit straight up, I did not like this episode at all. And I will get into why in a moment, but staying true to the nature of balanced review, I will discuss some of this episode's merits first. Firstly, the message of the dangers of social media, spreading of misinformation, and the unchecked influence that this gives public figures who don't measure their words before speaking was made abundantly clear. We as the audience all know that Conrad and his idiots are just that: uninformed, willfully ignorant, bored idiots wanting to parade themselves as some kind of social justice campaigners. This was perfectly illustrated by the newsreel scene where the headline stated "Fascism in Britain," because even though we know that it is actually Conrad and his crew that are far-right sympathisers, it is UNIT that are being attacked in this scene because the sources for the news story were biased and staged to show UNIT in a bad light. It highlights how reactive we as a society have become to things that we may not always stop to consider the reliability of social media streams as a source. Secondly, this was the second Dr. Light episode where Ruby was the main character, in an episode that was deliberately intended to be a political commentary, at a time in real life when themes in this episode are very prevalent. The episode did a very good job of building up the extraterrestrial threat, while also making it clear that the real threat was in fact very human. The worst of humanity, for that matter. Additionally, Ruby's character got a lot of development in this episode. Not only does this address her trauma, but also shows her moving on with her life. Even if Conrad did manipulate that, Ruby's character got a lot more development from this episode, and if the rumours are to be believed, her departure from London may well set her up for another appearance this series. I also do really have to commend Jonah Hauer-King for his portrayal of Conrad Clarke, because he had the very difficult task of playing this vile little man, and he did an amazing job. It's just such a shame that his character was so unlikable. On the subject of Conrad, think tank. Now, for long-time fans of the show, you'll know that think tank is the public name for the National Institute for Advanced Scientific Research, a group that was responsible for the K1 incident in the 1970s. This group was originally conceived by Hilda Winters as a public arm of the Scientific Reform Society, whose alternate right agenda involved revising world politics to be entirely led by a scientific elite. And when they were stopped by the Fourth Doctor, Sarah Jane, and the Brigadier, Ms. Winters would later return to wreak havoc on Sarah Jane's life from the early 90s to the 2000s, until she finally died in prison after being convicted once more for conspiracy to release a bioweapon in India. So, if we're to draw parallels between this scenario, Conrad is Miss Winters, Ruby is Sarah Jane, and Kate is the Brigadier. Not only is this a nice throwback to Unit's past, showing that not all of their enemies are of alien origin, but it's also a subtle reference to the Sarah Jane audios, where the last of Think Tank were seen previously. Finally, this episode showed many different sides to Kate. Her relationship with Colonel Ibrahim, which is emotional, but it still doesn't cloud her judgment when it comes to work. There's also the motherly role that she plays towards Ruby, and then the ruthless cold side to her that drove her to let the Shriek out, attack and maim Conrad. Not only was this an amazing performance by Gemma Redgrave, but it also hammers home that message that sometimes, when the Doctor's not around, Unit and many of the other Doctor's associates will have to resort to slightly less Doctor-esque tactics, because unfortunately the Doctor's approach does not always work. You know, we're only human, after all. Moving on to the cons, and in case you haven't guessed by my tone of voice, there were a lot. First of all, Conrad Clarke. I am not mincing my words when I say that this character was an absolute arsehole. Doctor Who thankfully features irredeemable characters sparingly, however I cannot stress this enough when I say that the character of Conrad Clarke is the single most rage-inducing, hateable character of this era of Doctor Who. I thought Lindy Pepperbean and Roger Ap-Gwilliam were bad, but this man takes the golden medal for the worst of the worst. Not only was he an immature, delusional, far-right bigot, but he was also a narcissistic liar who manipulated Ruby and shot a man just to get his little face in the papers. Like, the red flags were actually there from the get-go, but thanks to expert writing, they were quickly and very well hidden. Conrad fixates on Ruby. Their relationship moves far too quickly. Ruby gets comfortable with telling him things that he shouldn't know. None of his friends have met her, even after an extended period of dating, and Ruby spoke less about the Doctor while she was with him. Grade A narcissistic boyfriend behaviour. Secondly, the theme of misinformation and the dangers of this in this episode I personally found very difficult to watch. Now, this is just me, and I know that Doctor Who has always been a political show, and stories set on Earth are a prime opportunity to point out some of today's injustices. I think, however, in this particular story, it might have gone a little bit too far with an issue that many in the audience are confronted with on a daily basis, thanks to social media. Many people are unfortunately exposed to bigotry, willful ignorance, and then experience the frustration of being hounded by strangers online who won't listen to reason, and the dangers that giving these ideas a platform can have. In this episode, we see Ruby having to literally be escorted by armed guards from her house to get to the car parked outside because a mob had gathered around her front yard. This scene in particular left a very bitter taste in my mouth because, for one thing, she's a 20-year-old girl, and for two, she's confessed to having unresolved trauma from her time with the Doctor, and now she's being hounded by a bunch of right-wing sympathisers who don't know the full story. Sorry, but I absolutely hated all of this. As if 73 Yards didn't torture Ruby enough with her friends and family abandoning her for no reason, this episode manages to one-up that by having her boyfriend who she trusted betray her and turn out to be the complete opposite of what she thought he was. Just horrible, in my opinion. Really horrible. That also transitions nicely into a big bugbear of mine about this episode. Ruby and Unit's judge of character. First of all, speaking to the character of Ruby Sunday. If a stranger posts a photo of you online, taken without your knowledge, and begins asking, "Have you seen this woman?" the very last thing you should do is meet them. And even if you do meet them, it was very easy for Unit to find out about Conrad's online habits later in this episode, so surely Ruby's first port of call should have been to call Kate and be like, "Hey, mother number 3, this guy's looking for me online. Is he genuine or just a creep?" She would have gotten an answer straight away. And then there's Unit with Jordan Lang. Again, another slimy little rat who could have easily been weeded out at the interview stage. Had somebody done a proper background check. Like, first Harriet Arbinger, then Jordan Lang, who is in charge of vetting Unit applicants, because I've got a few choice words for them. And finally, and here I am willing to play devil's advocate here for a moment, Kate's ultimate handling of Conrad. Now, I know I've just spent the last few minutes hating on him, but here's the thing. Malicious people do not need any help to ruin their own lives because eventually their actions catch up with them. If the Shriek had escaped by accident and Conrad, while blundering into Unit's tower, suddenly found himself being chased by the monster, then that would have been a much more fitting punishment and a cautionary tale for all of his live streamers. And Kate, who we know from her previous experiences is a mother herself, you'd think she'd know not to give a tantruming child what they're demanding, because best case scenario, they end up feeling entitled to keep making demands. Worst case scenario, they don't realise what they're demanding is dangerous, and upon receiving it, they get hurt. Instead, Kate willingly gave Conrad up to the Shriek, not faltering once, despite knowing that she put a civilian in danger, and worse, he got his arm bitten off. And Kate's responsible for that. While it may very well have been satisfying to see Conrad crying like a baby and admitting that he was a liar, I personally thought that this was just a step too far. Because even bigots don't deserve to be maimed. It's just wrong. Moving on to the discussion, I think we may have just gotten another glimpse into who Mrs. Flood might be. She called herself the Governor. What is Governor synonymous with? Master. Now, I know last week I was entertaining the theory of her being the Rani, but we also know from the giggle that the Master is back out in the universe. It wouldn't be the first time that the Master has hidden on Earth as a human, or manipulated the events of the series to their advantage, or regenerated into a woman. It's all been done before. And the Master could very easily be doing it again, especially if their appearance throughout time aren't entirely their own plans. Who knows, Mrs. Flood might be working for a higher power. Has Mrs. Flood begun working with one of the Pantheon? Maybe. Okay, that brings us to the end of this review. Overall, I really didn't enjoy this episode that much. It struck too many sensitive chords and left a very bitter taste in my mouth. However, I will commend it for being very well written, and the actor's performance throughout it was phenomenal. What did you guys think of the episode? Let us know in the comments of your favourite streaming app or in the comments section of our social media posts for this episode on Instagram and TikTok, at Tardisian Files Podcasts. We also have a Blue Sky account now under the handle at tardisianfiles.bsky.social, where we will not only be posting about new episodes, but we'll also be using it to engage with our lovely viewers to hear more of your ideas and feedback. Please leave a like and subscribe, and as always, see you next time on Tardisian Files.